Linda, thanks for joining me today. Super stoked to have you on the Mark Divine Show.
It
So,
is great to be here, and it's nice to meet you, Mark. I've read so much about you, and you've got an incredible background, so I'm honored to be interviewed
no,
by
that's
you.
great. Thank you. Appreciate that. And it was fun to learn about your greenest house in America up there near Stanford. That's a pretty interesting story. It's not what we
Yeah,
want to talk about today, but I think that's it takes a lot of effort just where you're describing that. Like that must have been quite a project.
yeah, it was pretty incredible. We were very blessed to have kind of 30 different green gurus kind of working with us and having a
Right.
team of people who were building, from architects to interior architects to our contractor, who were really committed. So we actually
Right.
built a document that had 6 themes. We didn't build a program, we built themes. So a gathering
Mm-hmm.
place, outside in, environmentally
Mm-hmm.
regenerative,
Mm-hmm.
global sensibility, multi generational, and a sense of soul. And we basically
Oh,
gave
that's cool.
people this little deck that had 6 themes. And if they really could feel the vibe of that, then, and really were willing to do the work, then they became part of the team. So it was this extraordinary effort, because our realization was, listen, one house cannot make a difference, but it can be a pebble in a pond and have a
Right.
reverberating effect. So we've done field trips and science classes and political events and lots of
Right.
things to basically raise awareness about kind of the importance of
Yeah,
sustainability
that's
and
what I
climate
was just going
change.
to say that house now provides kind of an epicenter for a whole ecosystem of learning and outreach, and I think that's really cool. And
Yep.
I'm curious, for anyone who's interested, what was the financial kind of additive? Like, what was the per cost add to try to per square foot to build a house like that?
Everybody
If
asks me
it
this.
if it usually is like $3 a square foot or 300 a
Yeah,
square foot, what is it like for this?
it it's not, and it's basically almost zero, and I'll tell you
Really?
why. Yeah, and see, this is the myth of green building. And there were three
Hmm.
things that we were trying to do with the house, which is, to one was to bust the myths about green building, which is, number one, it's
Hmm.
ugly. You have to live in a
Hmm.
concrete box with no windows. Two is that it's twice as expensive, and three is that you have to change your lifestyle, like never shower, right,
Hmm. Right.
never flush your toilets, etc. And
Yeah.
so on the Amory Levins, who founded the Rocky Mountain Institute, probably one of the world's leading experts on climate change, sustainability, and green building, he basically was a huge mentor of ours. And he said, listen, the myth about the financials are the following. Number one, yes, you are going to be paying for things that you wouldn't be paying for because you're building green, solar
Right.
panels. We have,
Hmm.
ground source heat exchange, so geothermal. But then you have to subtract all the capital costs that you're not spending, right? And so we
Hmm.
have no HVAC in this house
Hmm.
at all. So there's a lot of capital costs you don't have to spend because you're building green. The third
Hmm.
thing is, yeah, there are some things that we were early. So, for instance, our windows are totally green, but you're putting windows in anyway. So there's a
Right.
little bit of an economies of scale issue that hasn't occurred yet with
Hmm.
windows, but that's coming much faster, right? We were doing this 12
Right.
years ago. But the fourth is, you have no operating costs, right? So we have
Mm.
a roof that's a 100-year roof. It's 85% made of recycled materials, 100% recyclable coming off the roof, zero maintenance for 100 years. And
That's
so you have
fascinating.
to actually add those four things together. And that's what
Right.
actually gets you to the point where you realize, I mean, we have no heating costs, right? We have no air conditioning.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that people basically think, oh, well, green building's so expensive. And most, frankly, lazy contractors,
Hmm.
unfortunately, don't want to invest in learning how to build green. And so they value engineer the green elements out of it, which are really unnecessary, because if you actually just take the extra step. Now, 12 years later, it's gotten a lot better. People are
Hmm.
more engaged. Climate change is a bigger deal. And so we're finding fewer and fewer people value engineering it out. But,
Hmm.
we produce all of our own. We have 121 solar panels. We produce
Hmm.
all of our own electricity. We offset all the carbon that we
Hmm.
use for travel or vacations. So,
Excellent.
it's just about being intentional about, and building by design, not by default.
Right. How far away do you think we are from major developers, who are building big projects from doing what you were doing at
Not
your,
Yeah, no,
feasible
no, it's
scale?
a great question. I think we're finding more and more developers. It depends on where the market is and the demand. But honestly, it is, because, especially now in this current situation where we're seeing where people are kind of burning up or, fighting cyclones and hurricanes. And, we have, the war in Europe. I
Mhm.
think more and more people are far more engaged on kind of where their source of energy is coming from and how you can really address this. The other thing that's happening is that so many boards now are focused on ESG
Mhm.
initiatives, one
Mhm.
of which is
Mhm.
obviously sustainability. So there's
Mhm.
pressure coming, especially for public companies that are home builders, that are public companies, the
Mhm.
scale builders. They're getting far more pressure
Right.
from their shareholders, from their boards, to basically making these moves,
Right.
and they're getting a premium for them. It's also, as I said, the economies of scale is helping us because now it's
Mhm.
driving the cost down to build green, so it's becoming
Mhm.
almost a wash. But
Mhm.
it's more around, unfortunately, in kind of the civic situation that we're in, where there's just so much divisiveness and it becomes this badge of honor to not build green. That's a problem, right? And so
Yeah.
what we really have to do is to get people to understand, look, we're building for 7 generations. We're building for our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren. And this is, as I said, we'll inspire you or shame you into building green, but
Mhm.
really it's the right thing to do for the planet and for humanity.
Before I move on, I'm curious, how can you make the claim that the roof is a 100-year roof? Like, what is in your roof
It's
that's gonna
stainless
make it last
steel.
100 years?
It's stainless
It's what?
steel.
Stainless steel. Wow.
Yeah. I'll
Interesting.
walk you around afterwards. I can literally show you the picture,
Okay.
but it's a stainless steel roof. And we had a lot of people who were doing a lot of calculations. Um, our civil engineer, we basically we did everything from looking at, so if you look at the production of Portland cement is
Mhm.
responsible for 8% of the carbon emissions in the world. And so
Hmm.
we offset that Portland cement with slag and fly ash, which is a byproduct right now that exists and there's no place for it to go. And so we could reduce the carbon by 300,000 pounds just in the foundation that we built. And
Hmm.
so, the calculations are there. It's fairly simple. Like for us, we had a challenge in California because the goal is to get your supplies no more than 500 miles from where you are. But
Mhm.
California is so big that it's hard to get all your supplies from 500 miles. So you basically have to
Mhm.
take the carbon emissions from the supply chain and where you get it. You have to kind of, so we have to kind of
Wow.
exceed to be environmentally regenerative. We have to exceed to basically offset the carbon of shipping things here. So we basically
Right.
did the calculations all along the way. But we know from the wood, for instance, we have FSC certified wood or recycled wood or reclaimed wood, but we use that to teach people. So like reclaimed wood, a lot of people, so we have no tropical hardwoods in the house because
Hmm.
in a lot of other countries, they'll take it out of the forest, they'll build some fake garage or storage thing, then they'll take it down and count it as reclaimed, but it's not
Okay.
really reclaimed. So you really
Really?
have to understand the provenance of the supplies that you're getting, and you need to have that chain. That's the beauty of FSC certified wood, is from forest to fixture. You basically have to have kind of the paperwork all along the way that demonstrates
Mhm.
that it's green, that it's been basically in that chain of that supply chain is solid.
That is fascinating. Now, your professional life is as a unicorn builder, or an intrapreneur grower of some sort.
Right.
So I'm really interested in that, and I know that your attention to detail and what you've just described with the building this house is certainly important for you know what you do. And your book is called, recently wrote, was called "The Unicorn Within: How Companies Can Create Game-Changing Ventures at Startup Speed." This is a fascinating subject to me because I have some experience in venture capital, and I'm invested in like maybe 15 startups, but I've never really seen it done internally, where an internal operation can create a unicorn or create an organization that has kind of the same attributes or similar attributes and success as a entrepreneur founded organization. So maybe just give us a sense for what is an internal unicorn, or whatever you call it, a spin
Right.
out or a spin up within a big company, and how does that work?
Yeah. Let me just step back a little bit just to understand
Sure.
kind of why I'm a native Californian, right? I grew up in
Mhm.
California. I grew up with all the it's only interesting because I grew up with all the people who founded the venture capital industry. They're all friends of my
Right.
family. So I've been
Well,
deeply
you
rooted.
live right around them all, right up near
Exactly.
Stanford and
Deeply
Silicon
rooted
Valley.
and connected with all these people my entire
Mhm.
existence. They're friends of my parents. But then most of my professional career has been in the boardrooms and C-suites of the Global 500, but I'm
Mhm.
bilingual between those two worlds.
Mhm.
And what we were seeing about, you know, if you look at large companies, right? If you this there are two really really interesting statistics. If you look at the Fortune 500 list 50 years ago, the average life of a company on the Fortune 500 list was 75 years. Today it's
Right.
15 years and declining. Of
Right.
the companies on that Fortune 500 list 50 years ago, 88% of them are out of business.
Right.
Okay?
I've heard those
So
stats. It's
that's
mind-blowing,
it's
yeah.
crazy. And even if you don't think they're going out of business, today there are something like 1,000, about 1,100 unicorns around the world
Mhm.
worth $3.1 trillion. So even if you
Mm.
don't think they're going out of business, they're leaving a lot of money on the table. But
Mhm.
there's two altruistic reasons I founded the company, and I really believe in helping create unicorns from within. Number one is people are living longer and longer because of healthcare and technology. And
Mhm.
as a result, they're going to be working 60, 70, 80 years, right? You are the king of human potential. You understand what that means.
Right.
And what and as much as we love startups, most of those people are employed by large company.
Right.
And those
Mhm.
people need meaningful, purposeful work. So I believe
Mhm.
most large companies need to look more like Berkshire Hathaway, where they're a portfolio of companies, because it
Right.
allows those people to be closer to the customer, more create, have entrepreneurial opportunities, be more creative. You can kill things faster if they're not working. You're more
Mhm.
agile. So that's one reason. The second reason is that large companies, I believe most of the big, hairy problems that are facing the world need our large companies able to lean in, build ventures around those problems, disrupt, move quickly, because things like climate change, sustainability, disease, racism,
Mhm.
poverty, water, education, they need our large companies focusing on them because many of our governments are dysfunctional,
That's
or
right.
at best they're transitory. And
Mhm.
most NGOs, as much as we love them, cannot solve problems at global scale. And
Mhm.
so allowing our big companies to do that and allowing them to drive growth through venture building and venture investing is really good, not just for the companies and their shareholders, but for their people, their team members, for their communities, and for the world. And so
Yeah.
when I think about this internal entrepreneurship, there are a lot of people who have the potential to be entrepreneurs. They don't
Mhm.
always have the risk profile that enable them to be entrepreneurs. But
Mhm.
because and large companies have this incredible, they have ideas, they have talent, they have channels, they have customers. So they have the ability to basically spawn off these, not all of them will be unicorns, but singles, doubles, triples, unicorns. They absolutely have
Mhm.
the ability to do it, and they have the ability to do it at scale, and they have the ability to
Mhm.
do it with their own people.
Mhm. That's fascinating. A lot of people listening might think, it was the industrial age, large corporations that caused a lot of the problems we see in the world. So, who are we to think that the conceptual or information age large companies are now going to solve them? But there has been a sea change, really, because culture is
Totally.
demanding and boards are now demanding the ESG and the more multi-stakeholder kind of capitalism.
And
And,
their
and
children.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. Their children are. That's a really well said. I agree with that. Um, so many people think that ESG is just virtue signaling. What is your
Mhm.
experience with that
I,
in most
I I
companies?
think
Are
it
they
is in
really
some.
doing ESG well, or is it just to look good for the public
No,
in the
they are
stock price?
absolutely. We're on a podcast, so I can't share, but at the end, I will share with you. I want to show you a little video of a venture that Intel is building. But
Hmm.
many of our clients are doing things. We have big, large industrial clients working on the new energy frontier,
Hmm.
working on raising up the lowest rung of the socioeconomic class by helping them get change the way we think about temporary help. We
Hmm.
have people building intelligent infrastructure, smart buildings to
Hmm.
detect disease, to basically make them more energy efficient. We have people who are looking at decarbonization of the supply chain. So
Hmm.
I think people are I think yes, there a lot of people contributed to kind of where we are today, whether they're large
Mhm.
companies, small companies, governments, individuals.
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
actually believe that most large companies are led by more activist CEOs than we've seen ever before, right? If you look at Tim
Mhm.
Cook and Apple and
Yep. Mhm.
LGBTQ rights, we're seeing
Mhm.
more and more CEOs really leaning in and really wanting to make a difference. Honestly, I
Right.
think one of the biggest thing that holds up big company CEOs from doing this more at scale is frankly the financial markets. I think
Mhm.
the financial markets bear the blame, if you will, for how many companies are going out of business and how many companies are not able to make the investment in these longer term, deep
Mhm.
science, tech based ventures that are going to be required because they require quarter to quarter earnings.
That's
And
right.
the thing that's kind of a BS about that is that if you think about it, it's I'm a child of Silicon Valley. I love my startups, but every startup that goes public on Nasdaq or on NYSE or on LSE gets a hall pass for what, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. They don't actually have to turn a profit. They judge them on revenue and customer acquisition. Well, guess
Mhm.
what? They have the same ability to judge the unicorns within these large companies in the same way. They could be
Mhm.
using a different set of metrics which would enable our large companies to make the investment in the portfolio of growth opportunities that they have the capability to develop.
Right. Is there any movement within the SEC to change that reporting requirement for
Well,
for
hopefully
unicorns?
we're basically actually inviting a bunch of Wall Street analysts and other people in to, in essence,
Mhm.
own a shift in this where
Mhm.
you can still judge the core and legacy business this way, but
Mhm.
hey, look at this portfolio of growth opportunities that they're creating that actually could become the next Airbnb, become the next Netflix, become the next Palantir, become the next
Mhm.
unicorn. These big companies, and the big companies have the ability to accelerate and augment those ventures much better than any well-funded startup because they have
Mhm.
balance sheets they can work with. And
Right.
they have these incredible people inside, these internal
Right. Right.
entrepreneurs who have the capability to do it. They just don't have the risk profile to spin out and do it on their own.
Right. Right. What we're really talking about is creating a culture of innovation, and my experience is that it's very, very difficult to change a culture. So if you have a big company, like IBM or anybody, it's like trying to change that entire culture to a culture of innovation is like a serious moonshot. It's likely to fail. But if you can create, a kind of a black ops box within the company or even outside the company that can attract some innovators, then you've got a much better chance of success.
That's
So
one of the
so
things
how
that
do
we
you know
talk.
how do we move from into that kind of dialogue within a company that doesn't have that culture?
That is like, I say this to CEOs all over the planet. I do not believe in innovation transformation. I do not
Right.
think it works. But here's what I
Yeah. Right.
believe. I believe if you take the mothership and you tether enough speedboats in the form of new ventures to that
Mm-hmm.
mothership, and
Mm-hmm.
you basically start to see that that could be worth 100 million, 200 million,
Mm-hmm.
300 million, whether it's yen, euros, or dollars, then all of a sudden those senior executives are going, wait a minute, whoa, that could be $1 billion of market cap. That's $2 billion
Mm-hmm.
of market cap. Wait a minute, what are those from to shifts you told me that I have to make, whether it's around procurement or politics or risk tolerance or governance, to ensure that these ventures reach escape velocity? Then they're paying attention, and so you place small bets and you basically tether them to the mothership. And what's interesting, that's where the Mach 49 name comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Mach escape velocity. It's all about how do you help these ventures reach escape velocity. Escape velocity is actually Mach 37. That name was taken, so I needed a number bigger than 37
I
I
like it.
need a number bigger than 37 for my wonky physics friends in the Silicon Valley. So we picked Mach 49 because all these large companies had been flocking to Silicon Valley and to California looking for that, innovation fairy dust, that gold, like the gold miners were doing in
Mm-hmm.
1849. So there's a little California history in the name as well, but it
Mm-hmm.
really is about helping them reach escape velocity. But your point is extraordinarily correct, which is, you can't, you
Mm-hmm.
really, what we say to people is, look, you've got to, in essence, experiment. You got to do one, you got to do two, you got to do three, you got to do 10. And then
Mm-hmm.
once you get to a portfolio, then you can basically see the transformation. The thing
Hmm.
that's also important, though, is that there is a role for everyone in the company in this process, because the
Hmm.
challenge that some people think is, oh, it's only the internal entrepreneurs. Well, no,
Hmm.
there's actually four types of people who get involved in venture building and venture investing. There are the new venture team members. Those are the founding team. And they're the ones who like have the idea and they're really excited, and they're basically working on the incubation or the acceleration of the venture. But then
Hmm.
you need a new venture board, and those are the senior executives. One of the things that causes internal venture incubation to fail are senior executives who fail to grow. They fail
Hmm.
to learn how
Interesting.
to become internal venture capitalists. They fail to move from net present value to option value, from putting all their eggs in one basket to a portfolio model, from really redefining the metrics by which they're measuring success, from the
Hmm.
core legacy business metrics to these new metrics that are required.
Hmm. Hmm.
But that new venture board is very important. Those are the senior executives who can make a go, no go decision. They have access to funding. They have access to customers, often millions of them, which is what differentiates you from any well-funded startup.
Hmm.
They can give you access to the core competencies, assets, and capabilities of the organization that can help the venture reach escape velocity, and they can remove the friction, which we can talk about because the friction is real, right? The
Hmm.
orthodoxies, inertia, and the antibodies. So new venture team, new venture board. There is the venture factory group, or the corporate venture capital groups that are inside. Those are the ones facilitating the venture investing or the venture building. They become what we call the Mach 49 inside when we're working with a client, because our goal is to build capability, not dependency, work ourselves out of a job. And then the
Hmm.
fourth group is what we call new venture advocates. And these are really important people. These are people who are entrepreneurial. They might be in legal. They're the person who's going to write the one-page term sheet, not the 40-page term sheet. The person in
Hmm.
procurement who's going to get somebody on the pre-approved vendor list in 2 weeks, not 2 months. When you're a pet food company, you need to get a hardware vendor. They're the people in HR who can spell growth hacker. So these new
Hmm.
venture advocates are really important because it lets them be involved in the art of entrepreneurial and venture building and creation, but they don't necessarily want to be the entrepreneur, right? They don't like the pace, they don't like the lack of structure or the ambiguity in those early stages, but they're actually
Hmm.
super valuable. And this is how the whole group can get the whole company can actually get involved.
Do you find that these four types of players are already existent in most of the organizations that you begin to work with, or do you have to attract and recruit them?
No, 100%. All there are people who can be in all four categories exist in every company. Now, there are times, for instance, we had a big, wonderful client of ours, big bank, and one of the things that they were talking about is a digital platform. And
Hmm.
the people on the new venture team were all investment bankers. None of them had built a digital platform before. They could stay as founders, but we needed to bring in a CEO who had experience building a digital platform. So sometimes you'll recruit from the outside or from other places if you need to augment skills or capabilities that the internal teams might have. But I promise you, every single large organization has representatives of those four categories inside their organization.
That's interesting. A lot of unicorns tend to be very nimble in terms of staff size, right? They're small, they move fast, they break things, all that kind of stuff. And I'm curious, and also their incentives are like they want to hit the home run. So how do we set up an incentive structure for a unicorn within a larger company that may have a little bit more rigidity to it,
Yeah,
so that you
brilliant,
don't
brilliant
kind of
question.
tick off all the other employees?
Yeah. So we work on compensation issues all the time with people, and
I bet.
there's two obviously the new venture board members, they're getting compensated because you're driving meaningful growth for the organization. So they have those incentives in place already to basically become
Hmm.
growth stocks, not value stocks. So that's most of
Hmm.
the senior executives who come to us, that's the shift they want to move.
Hmm.
There's two other players inside on the venture building side. There's the Mach 49 inside that venture factory team, and then there's the new venture teams. And for the new venture teams, we set them up just like a real startup, but we set them up with what we call phantom stock. So it's
Hmm.
basically performance shares or performance bonuses based on hitting certain milestones. And
Mhm.
often what we'll do is we'll set up a really interesting compensation model where it's like an abacus. You've got two rows, right? And
Mhm.
one row is your current base and salary, and one row is phantom equity. And so
Mhm.
we'll find people who might be in their mid 50s who have kids in, high school or college, they can't afford the risk. They're just so excited to be entrepreneurs. They just stay with their same base and bonus because they have that
Mhm.
opportunity. But others who basically can take risk may scale their base and bonus way down, but they'll
Mhm.
scale the equity way up. So you might have somebody who's younger among the new venture team who has no risk, no debt, no anything else. They're so they can have more financial rewards than maybe somebody else because they can afford it, but they're both getting
Mhm.
to be entrepreneurs. And so these
Mhm.
phantom shares work really well because they're performance based. So it's
Right.
not any different really than how you compensate salespeople. You compensate salespeople for performance. There's already existing compensation models, typically in almost every organization, that you can mimic because these are based on performance and metrics.
Mhm.
The other team that we also want to compensate is that venture factory team that is enabling each of the venture teams to do the work, right? To go through the methodology, to ideate, to incubate, to accelerate, and they're facilitating that work. Typically they don't share in the cap table, but what we
Mhm.
typically do is we will say, okay, 1% of every venture goes into a pool. And then the
Mhm.
venture factory team shares in that pool. Because if I'm somebody who got put on a venture that we decide to kill, because we want to make sure people are incentivized to kill ventures, not just keep them going,
Mhm.
that was luck of the draw. And then this other person got put on a rocket ship, then you want to share, you want to make sure people are shared. So the incentives are aligned, and you want people to basically be just as motivated to kill an idea that has no legs than to continue with an idea that is going really, really well. And so the
Right.
compensation piece, though you are correct, is a big deal. Also for the new venture advocates, often there's like a certification for that, not unlike a certification they might do that would add a bump to their salary. So we try to make sure that it's fair across all categories in terms of the opportunity to do well should you hit your metrics
Right. Right.
perform.
It sounds to me like, I mean, you mentioned Berkshire Hathaway, that the goal with these unicorns is not to spin them out, but to kind of keep them as a portfolio or a family of businesses, so that the original entity, the legacy entity, has a future. Is that correct?
100%. Yeah,
That's
there's
interesting.
basically three tip. Most of our clients are multi-billion-dollar multinational public companies, and as I said, their goal is to move from being perceived as a value stock to a growth
Hmm.
stock. They want to
Hmm.
build their growth engine through venture building and venture
Hmm.
investing.
Hmm.
And so they do want to retain them. But there are three options for people. Typically, one option is you basically spin it back into an existing business unit.
Hmm.
That's typically the last option we like to consider. And the reason
That
why
sounds
is,
complicated.
well, it's not as complicated. It's just that in fairness to those heads of those business divisions, they set their budgets a year ago. Their
Hmm.
bonuses are based on the metrics achieving the what they set up a year ago. And now you hand them this fledgling thing that doesn't even have any revenue yet, right?
Hmm.
And you
Hmm.
expect them to take care of it and invest in it. So that's not really fair. So that's why we say keep the venture, even if you do want to spin it in, keep it in the incubator long enough that it's demonstrated product market fit and early revenue, because now it's a shiny object in somebody's bag that they want to sell. So
Right.
that's one option. The more popular option, if you want to keep it inside, is to create a wholly owned subsidiary. And
Hmm.
so that's really good because then they basically become their own lines of business with their own
Right.
metrics, but they're still part of the mothership. The third
Hmm.
option is you can spin it out. Most of the times when our clients choose to spin them out is usually twofold. One is that it requires a ton of capital, like it's an
Hmm.
infrastructure build, or it's a long, it's an energy, it's hydrogen, right? So it's something that requires a lot of capital, that they want to share the risk with someone, either
Hmm.
another
Hmm.
corporate or a venture capitalist or a private equity firm or something. The second reason they might spin them out is that it requires more superpowers than they bring to the table. And so they want
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
combine with another entity to basically pool the core competencies, assets, capabilities, the superpowers that they have to then
Hmm.
bring this forward.
Hmm.
So we've done a lot of joint incubation among different companies. We've also
Hmm.
been doing consortia. So there are some things, like frankly, decarbonization of the supply chain.
Hmm.
A lot of companies are looking at doing that. If they all build their own solution, they're going to whipsaw those members of the supply
Hmm.
chain, all these small, medium
Hmm.
sized businesses who can't afford, frankly, to be giving
Right.
you your scope 3 emissions report and your
Right.
scope 3 emissions report and your scope 3 emissions report. You can't do it. So there are some things that, like Swift in the banking
Mhm.
industry,
Right.
that
You need to
makes sense
collaborate.
to basically be consortia based
Hmm.
models of incubation. And so we're also, it's very cool because we're getting to look at a lot of that as well.
That is very fascinating. So most of the, I'd love to hear a couple kind of case studies, of success stories. But are most of these companies or these unicorns solving, like, instead of just like incrementally improving what the old company did, are they going after like some of these big intractable problems? It sounds like they are.
They are, they
Leveraging
are.
new technologies, exploring new tech, trying to solve the
Yeah.
world type problems.
No, totally. I mean, we have one large industrial Japanese client who basically has created a venture around EV bus depots,
Hmm.
right?
Oh,
So
wow.
almost
Hmm.
self-charging depots, big major things that they can then go and do a big deal with a municipality to basically
Hmm.
install these things. We've got another one that's basically looking at the forever tire, right?
Hmm.
So we're looking and the sustainability around and tires
Hmm.
doing that way and how you do. We have another large company who was looking at the circular economy and remanufacturing, right?
Hmm. Right.
Remanufacturing is a huge opportunity.
Right.
So we have another one that's looking at a zero water home, right?
Mm.
So the beauty of working with large companies is that they have incredible R&D groups, they have incredible, they have lots of people, they have global reach and channels, they have customers who want to pilot with them. And so they're not doing that almost, well, with us, partly because our clients, it doesn't make sense for them to come to us for kind of incremental kind of horizon
Yeah,
one
I was going to say
kind of
you might
thing.
be driving some of that,
Yeah,
some of
the
those
people are coming
guidelines.
to
Like, you're
us
going
and
to work with someone
looking.
to, right,
Right. They're looking to make a big shift. They're looking
right.
to build this growth engine. And I think it's really important. Like a lot of these companies now, they started doing one venture. Now they're realizing they need to do those ventures at scale, right? Like any venture capitalist learns, you don't just have one in your
Hmm.
portfolio. So
Hmm.
they're building
Right.
venture factories. And now in many cases, we're actually starting to talk to them about building growth, growth divisions. Because if you build a whole growth division, then you can it's easier to keep it separate and have the metrics here for those ventures, separate from the core and legacy business. And so the
Right.
analysts can then review them separately and then they can meld it into a PE ratio that makes sense. But yeah, it's really it's getting to do this at scale that's really helping them, and it's helping, it's also the chief human resources officers that we're dealing with, the chief talent officers love what we're doing because
Hmm.
it enables them to recruit and retain
Yeah.
people across
Yeah.
the board, because now people are getting the opportunity to be creative, to be entrepreneurial, and to actually have the assets available to them to augment and accelerate these ventures faster than, frankly, most startups can accelerate.
Yeah. Just so I'm clear, what is the difference between a company that has a venture division like Google Ventures versus a growth division
Oh yeah, great,
that
great
is
question.
incubating a unicorn internally?
Right. So we talk about there's two, they're the yin and the yang of each other, right? We talk
Okay.
about there is venture building and there's venture
Right.
investing. And we believe that those actually go hand in hand. So the
Okay.
venture building is when you're creating a venture out of an idea that you generated yourself. And we talk about
Hmm.
venture building across the spectrum of venture creation, from ideate, and we
Hmm.
can talk about how people are sourcing ideas, to incubate, to accelerate, and then to scale. And all three of those stages are different and they're equally important. Most people, like, they garbage in, garbage out on the ideation, so you got to be careful about that. But the place where people forget is accelerate, but I'll come back to that. Then
Hmm.
that's the venture building. Then there's the venture investing. And there's kind of three reasons why people will will look externally. So one is to basically stay current on the art of the possible, right? Venture investing
Hmm.
allows you to place a whole bunch of small bets and watch how things unfold over time and before you decide you want to invest. The other thing is that one option is to buy. I mean, is to build,
Right.
but the three other options are to buy, partner, and invest. And if you
Hmm.
have a CVC, a corporate venture capital group, a la a Google Ventures, right, or a
Hmm.
Sapphire, or Toyota Ventures, or Pernod Ricard has Conviviality Ventures, TDK has TDK Ventures, JetBlue has JetBlue Ventures. Those venture groups are really your sensor network to the external world. The venture building,
Hmm.
venture factory is focusing on kind of bringing ideas to life from inside. These are the ones that are looking outside and saying, ooh, we want to do this. Could we buy something to augment or accelerate a venture faster? Could we partner? So, AT&T was the best in the world. They never had a corporate venture capital fund, but they had an amazing strategic partnering service where they would, in essence, identify startups who could solve a client problem or their own problem, and then rather than just drop them off a cliff inside of the massive
Hmm.
AT&T, they actually did a really good job of shepherding them. So there's good ways to strategic partner and terrible ways. If you
Hmm.
do, if you're smart and you're a good strategic partner of these startups, then guess what? The VCs will bring you their best startups.
Right.
If you
Right.
are someone who basically wastes their time, they will bring you their dogs, right? That they hope you will
Hmm.
keep alive long enough for them to raise their next fund. But
Hmm.
but but so the CVC, the external looking group inside is focused on investing in startups to stay current on the art of the possible and to look at that. It's helping to basically scan to see where there might be good targeted M&A that they could do to accelerate the work they're doing internally. And they can do really solid strategic partnering to be a layer in something or to test something or to solve a problem internally that they don't have an idea how to solve. So we really
Hmm.
believe those things are the yin and the yang of each other. And so that's why Google has Google X and it has Google Ventures, right? Google
Right.
X would be
Yeah.
basically their venture building, their new
Yeah.
side, and they have Ventures, which is basically investing in the external world.
Right.
TDK has TDK Kindergarten, looking at the internal stuff, and TDK Ventures, which is scanning the globe for external opportunities.
Yeah. Thanks for that clarification. I'm When it comes to generating ideas, again, I want to invoke Google because they have this policy that you can spend 20% of your time on, something that you're passionate about that may have nothing to do with your job. What are some of the other best practices for a large organization to kind of kickstart ideation amongst the team that might lead to a viable project?
Right. And remember, 3M had that as a
Hmm.
rule long before Google even existed,
Did they?
right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, 3M basically your compensation was dependent upon you spending 20 to 30% of your time driving innovation.
Huh.
So they were
That's cool.
way early on that front. So when we companies come to us, typically they're in one of three stages when you think about ideate. Number one is some companies actually have tons of ideas, but they don't know what to do with them, and a lot of them it's garbage in, garbage out. Like some people have a big giant suggestion box. That is like the wrong thing. You do not want
Right.
that because it's just you actually want it hard for people to submit ideas. So
Right.
when we
They have to do their
basically
homework, right? And they have a certain
exactly.
protocol to follow and
Well,
whatnot.
and usually within we'll frame a challenge statement, which I'll come to in a second. So sometimes they have too many ideas and they need to basically we have a tool which is a new venture assessment tool that we give people, which is okay, what is is there customer pain? Is
Hmm.
there, so what's the desirability part, right? Is it
Hmm.
feasible to build? So like for a lot of opportunities, it's great. There might be tons of customer pain, but if it's time travel that we need to solve that pain, well, guess what? We don't have time travel yet. So the product's not feasible. So
Hmm.
you got to kill it, right? So
Hmm.
feasibility is another one. Viability is another one. Is there a business model there? Like, can you make money on this thing? Suitability is another one. Does it make sense for this particular mothership to be launching that? And then the
Hmm.
last is team, right? Can
Hmm.
we basically recruit a team that can basically bring it? So we have a set of 5 things that we help people sort through and bucket those ideas and figure out how to prioritize. So that's if they have too many ideas. Another way people come to us is that they have a domain that they are interested in. So
Hmm.
that you can't incubate. So we had a client come to us and they were interested in water, food, and road safety. Okay, you can't
Hmm.
incubate water. All right. So you can
Hmm.
incubate a zero water home, but you can't incubate water. And so you basically that when we have clients who do have that kind of that, and often like the strategy consultants will, hey, this is where you guys need to go, but they give them these big domains they should explore, but no, we're 100% focused on execution, right? I leave strategy
Hmm.
to, I've done it in my life, but I leave it for other people because we want to basically help them be tactical and practical. So when
Hmm.
they have those domains, we teach them to do what we call ecosystem mapping, which is go out and look at the wind. But don't just look at
Hmm.
wind if you're an energy company. Look at all the segments that make up wind. Then look at who's playing in each of those segments, whether they are big companies, whether they are venture capitalists, whether they are startups, and start to look and overlay where we talk about an asset jam. What are your core competencies, assets, capabilities, strengths? Where can you play across and where is there white space? Because some people want to go after something, but if BlackRock is putting $9 billion in that particular space, you're not going to invest $9 billion. So you should go either partner with them or go look
Yeah.
elsewhere. And
Right.
so we teach them to do ecosystem mapping and domain exploration. A third way is we will do venture competitions. Now, there's really
Mm.
good ways to do venture competitions and really bad ways to do venture
Hmm.
competition. We had one financial services client who came to us and was so excited about their venture competition. And because they had 1,500 ideas submitted, I said, oh,
Hmm.
terrific. So how many of those did you take forward? We took 70 forward to the second round. I said, okay, how many did you take forward to the last round? 10. Okay, so that's
Mm.
1,490 teams worth of people that you made unhappy because you had so many, you couldn't give them feedback. They didn't get any learning along the way. So basically, you roll that forward 3 years. Now you've got, 4,500, 4,400 sets of people unhappy. They start complaining that those incubator people don't know what they're doing and you get shut
Hmm.
down, right? Even if
Hmm.
you've got 3 good ones. And so it's really important that you're very intentional about you do these venture competitions where people who they get learning along the way. You make it kind of hard for them to submit, so they self-select out if they're not truly passionate about the idea,
Hmm.
and and then you give them feedback if they don't if they as you weed it down, because you will. Not everybody's going to win a venture competition, but they feel like they got a lot of value out of it, so that the next time they can submit and they've learned something or they can take it back to their job. So that's another way people source ideas. And then sometimes they just have an idea, and when they have an idea, we tell them, listen, all you need are 2 things to incubate a venture. You need a challenge statement, which is your hypothesis on the pain you're trying to solve, and
Hmm.
you need a stakeholder map. Who matters most, whether it's your direct potential customers or it is regulators or it's potential partners or supply chain members, et cetera. And then that gives you who you're going to interview. And from there, you go from ideate, you go straight into incubate. And incubate is you start with customer development. We say, look, when you're building a venture, it's pretty straightforward. Understand customer pain. I say to CEOs all over the world, surveys are statistically significant and strategically irrelevant, because all you've
Hmm.
done is outsource your visceral understanding and empathy for the customer to somebody
Hmm.
else who's going to repackage it and sell it. So, no one in the world knew they wanted a microwave oven, a minivan, or a DVR, right? But what they
Right.
could tell you was they weren't getting home to cook a healthy meal, they couldn't watch their favorite show, and they were having to cart an ever increasing number of kids, dogs, and sporting equipment to myriad places. They could tell you their pain. So you understand your customer pain. Then you marry it with the art of the possible. What are the current trends in technology that you can use to solve it? Uber doesn't exist if we don't have real-time payments, mobile phones, GPS, right? So that's where the CVC or the external scouts become important, because they're keeping their eye on what's current, what's the art of the possible. And then
Hmm.
you place a series of small bets. When we look at funding in Silicon Valley, we look at funding like an onion. Every layer of onion is a layer of risk. Could be
Hmm.
financial, could be technical, could be market. In the case of a large company, could be governance. You love it to death or you starve it of oxygen. And so the goal of the best entrepreneurs is, how do you remove the greatest amount of risk on the least amount of capital? And so
Hmm.
we really are helping them do this. They move into incubate, where they're doing customer development, product, and then building a business plan. And then they move into accelerate. And accelerate is where they've been funded. Now they're launching, and there's kind of 3 phases there. There's a build to validate, a build to automate, and then a build to scale phase. And what most people forget is you're not there just to focus on the product. The experiments and small bets you're running and the metrics that you're applying to those is the product, yes, but also what's your go-to-market set of experiments? How you're reaching your customer? What's your business model?
Hmm.
How are you going to make money? What kind of pricing experiments you want to run? What kind of delivery mechanisms are you get? What does your company look like? Because you can get the other three right, but not get to positive unit economics, and then you're out of business. And then the
Hmm.
last is, can you recruit the team? And
Hmm.
so on the ideation, so we move from ideate to incubate to accelerate, and then that's how these ventures get launched.
Mm. So how many, what magnitude or how much penetration within the, global 1000 or whatever large company group we want to look at are these internal unicorn type structures already extant, right? Where they're existing,
Yeah,
and how many of your clients, I guess, on the flip side are like completely green and they're saying, Linda, where do we start? And what's the first step that we take?
yeah, no, it's a great question. We believe that for one of the things that we are working on now is what we're calling a venture transformation business, because venture turnaround is too negative. But for
Mm-hmm.
every 1,000 ventures that get launched successfully, there's like 4,000 that didn't
Mm-hmm.
get launched, right? That didn't
Mm-hmm.
basically made a lot of mistakes, but there's still potential, and so there's the opportunity to turn them around.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that a lot of I would say probably 30% of, well, first of all, the interesting thing about the Global 1000 is there are so many companies you've never heard about. There are so many
Yep.
multi-billion dollar
Right.
companies you've never heard about that
Right.
are really, really interesting companies. And so it's not just all the brand names.
Right.
I'd say probably 40% of those are basically trying to do something where they're trying to drive growth through
Mm-hmm.
some form of venture building, venture investing, right? Some
Okay.
successfully, some not successfully.
Right.
I think the reason why we've experienced such hyper growth is because there is that much penetration, and so now people are
Mm-hmm.
realizing, ooh, you know what? We tried this, but either we tried this or we saw somebody else try it, but we want to actually do it right.
Yeah.
Because there's kind of, as I said, there's kind of three reasons people fail. One is they don't have any methodology. They think they
Mm-hmm.
can be Y Combinator, which is like our granddaddy of incubators. They can just have mentors and money, and that's all they need. And that
Mm-hmm.
does not work. And remember, those, Silicon Valley's success rate is 12%. No large
Mm-hmm.
company can afford a 12% success rate. Their shareholders won't put up with it. So they
Mm-hmm.
need methodology so that they can have a repeatable, scalable model that they can know when to kill things, et cetera. The second thing that happens is that they don't seize the mothership advantage. They have too much friction and not enough leveraging
Mm-hmm.
of their strengths. And then the third,
Mm-hmm.
as we talked about earlier, is that senior executives fail to grow. Those are the three things that really kill them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would say that, right now, there's two things that are really driving the move to both venture building and venture investing. One is just a need for growth. Innovation,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, has been a little bit discredited as a word because we had too many
Mm-hmm.
chief innovation officers who really didn't do anything, or
Mm-hmm.
it was just a lot of strategy, a lot of slideware, a lot of jazz hands around digital transformation till COVID hit and they got caught with their pants down, realizing, oops, maybe we haven't done as much as we thought we were done. So I would say COVID really had an impact because it really has driven the whole concept of digital transformation.
Right.
I think the whole issue around growth versus innovation, people are really realizing they need that. They need more shots on goal. And the
Mm-hmm.
third is the whole, frankly, move around ESG, climate change,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sustainability. I think people are really realizing, hey, you know what, this is serious and we got to take
Yeah.
it seriously. And there are a lot of these big, hairy problems, and you can do well by doing good.
Yeah. No doubt. When you go into a company, not a new company, but a company that's kind of new to this, how much of your job is training and how much is consulting and how much is like roll up your sleeves and start executing?
So
And it
we don't
seems to me you'd have to do a fair amount of training up front
actually,
to change
we
perspectives. And
our whole
yeah.
thing is learn by doing. So we
Okay.
actually there's three things that differentiate us. Number one is we're 100% focused on execution. Number two, when I founded the company, I said I'm not hiring any consultants, none.
Mm-hmm.
So 100% of the people, we joke you have to have gray hair and no hair to work with us. 100% of the people, no, I'm serious. We joke because we're bringing the next generation up, but the whole point
Right.
is I literally went to one of the top recruiters in Silicon Valley and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to focus on execution. We're going to do build CVCs. We're going to build venture factories, and we're going to do this at scale. And I don't want to hire any consultants. And he said, you have no idea how much you're in the right place at the right time, because there's all these 40, 50, 60-year-olds, super smart, super fit, super successful, super experienced, never going to retire, sick to death of working for 25-year-old CEOs. And
Mm-hmm.
so now that's what we found. So we have all these successful serial entrepreneurs, these top tier VCs. None of these guys and gals ever retire. Serious C-suite execs. So among our group, we've created about $60 billion in market cap in companies we've invested in, managed, created, or built. And so for
Hmm.
us, there's not a lot of convincing because they look at our track records. It's like, okay, crap. Yeah, you're not a 25-year-old who's working at one of the top consulting firms who the
Hmm.
partner bait and switched and sent to me. You're like the real deal. And so
Hmm.
what we say to people, and that's why we always have people start small, like we start with the design on the CVC side and say, hey, look, let's get that right. Or we do one venture on the venture building side. The whole point is the third thing that was unique about us is that, and this is why I could write the book, is from the day we started, we were all at a stage in our career where I don't need to be promoted anymore, right? So I don't need to
Hmm.
leave you just enough damaged to sell you the next thing so I can be promoted. And so our
Hmm.
whole thing was we are going, which is what happens in a lot of consulting firms, right? You got to sell the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And so you can't work yourselves out of a job. Whereas we, from the beginning, said we are going to build capability, not dependency. So we've invested 10 years. That's the methodology that's in the book. Because now
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is democratize what we do because not everybody can afford to work with
Right.
us, but we can help NGOs this way, nonprofits, we can help startups, we can help small, medium-sized businesses by both the book, and then we're creating a digital platform that people will be able to access as well,
Hmm.
called 2401. And we, which is 49 squared, by the way, if it makes no sense. So
I
anyway,
was doing the math.
I know it's 49
I don't think I
squared.
would have gotten there though.
No, it's 49 squared. So anyway, this is like it's insider baseball, but it's the whole point is it's also that you're doing venture, creation and venture investing, you know,
Hmm.
24 hours a day, starting day one. But I think they have this, we want to democratize what we do. And so building this capability is really, really important, right? To work yourselves out of a
Hmm.
job. And so that's why for us, most of the way we look at it is learn by doing, then you learn by co-leading, and then you learn by leading, and then you don't need us
Right.
anymore. And so
Hmm.
it's really our whole thing is look, this is not, but we're here not to, we have our growth programs group, which basically we will do master classes because there's some CHROs who want to promulgate the methodology to other places, or we'll do disrupt tours to get people, give that sense of urgency to your board of directors.
Hmm.
Uh, but for the most part, we're really here for not some abstract theoretical exercise. We're here to build a company or build a
Hmm.
venture firm.
Hmm. Yeah, you answered my next question, which was who's the real audience for your book? Because it didn't seem like it was going to be the rest of the Fortune 500s. You're trying to go across other industries, like you said, and also downstream into the SMB industry. Is
Right.
there a certain size where it makes sense to, or you'll have the resources to invest in these internal, innovation projects?
No,
Or
almost everyone can, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
think, and our this book is targeted towards the global 1,000 CEOs. There's a whole chapter that's all about people who are we basically made it easy. Harvard Press was amazing. My editor, Kevin Evers, was great in terms of how we structured the
Mhm.
book. I wrote the book because we realized, a how-to guide, you got to know how to do it to do a how-to guide, right? So I wrote the
Mhm.
whole thing, which is why it's kind of a year later than it should have been. But for CEOs, we basically have the intro and the first part, and then we have the last section. It's like, okay, like if you got to focus on this because it does have to start at the top because
Mhm.
grassroots efforts to do venture building, venture investing rarely work without support from senior executives. And so
Right.
it's you do have to have them. And then it's for those internal entrepreneurs, those internal venture factory members, and then it is to that broader group. There really isn't, you could basically apply the methodology if you were a mom and pop shop and you wanted to introduce a new service because it really is about understand customer pain, marry it with the art of the possible, and then pilot, place experiments, small bets,
Mhm.
prove to yourself that you can remove the greatest amount of risk on the least amount of capital. So it's a pretty straightforward, and then we've got a bunch of tools and templates and activity. I mean, there's a lot of
Mhm.
things in there that we're trying to basically give away to help people basically do what we help large companies do on a daily basis.
That's awesome. So besides reading the book, The Unicorn Within, how else can, a CEO who's like really inspired by this conversation, connect you or learn more about your work at your company?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the easiest is connect through us, mach49.com. It's pretty straightforward. The
Hmm.
website's So that's easy. I'm Linda at mach49.com. So that's pretty
Hmm.
simple as well.
Cool.
Ultimately, we will be launching the first version of 2401 powered by Mach 49, which will be the digital solution. And if people are interested in that, I can put them in
Hmm.
touch with the amazing woman who's the SVP of that group, the 2401 group, building that digital platform. So lots of ways to connect, lots of
Hmm.
ways, and we're always kind of putting out articles and things. And
Hmm.
it could be a CHRO, it could be a C-suite member, it could be an internal entrepreneur, but happy to help.
That's awesome. And I'm just out of curiosity, what is your favorite kind of most mind blowing project that you guys are involved in right now?
So, well, there's been, I'm, of course, as an eco warrior, eco geek, I'm super happy with all of the sustainability work, the big,
Right.
heavy sustainability work that we're doing, but we're doing
Hmm.
really cool stuff in the metaverse right now.
Really?
That's really, really interesting. And it's not like the ooh, it's really practical, kind of
Hmm.
industrial level
Hmm.
metaverse. Like, how could you, as a hotel, get people to come to the hotel, build community around that hotel, test those concepts
Hmm.
before you ever do that? How, if you're building a
Yeah.
city, do you test a city before that?
Hmm.
There's a bunch of just really, it's there's a really cool one that we're working on with a healthcare group, which is around, and again, this is where, large companies have so much passion and so
Right.
much empathy, but we're working with a healthcare system that's looking at cognitive behavioral therapy and augmenting
Hmm.
it with alternative medicines. So
Nice.
alternative
Hmm.
medicine was set up, whether it's cannabis or
Hmm.
psilocybin or ketamine or other things,
Hmm.
the that whole alternative medicine was set back many years by the movement, and dare was had great intentions, but it shut down research on things that
Right.
actually may have major impact on how people feel about themselves. And I think
Hmm.
all this stuff that we are learning about mental health is so powerful and so
Hmm.
important, that just so it's just really exciting, from sustainability to the mental health to water to smart buildings to basically fun. Like Pernod Ricard has Conviviality Ventures, super, the coolest venture fund. As Paul Holland, who runs our disrupting outside in practice, you got disrupting inside out, disrupting outside
Hmm.
in practice. He said, look, Conviviality Ventures is the first venture fund that was created to invest in fun, right?
Mm.
Because
I love it.
Ricard obviously is wines and spirits, but it's basically using its venture fund to move to the $3 trillion experience
Hmm.
economy.
Hmm.
So there's lots of cool things. It's a venture that called OmniBridge.
Hmm.
Intel founded the Emerging Growth and Incubation Division, and
Hmm.
this was a venture that came out of the venture competition that they ran. And then
Hmm.
they have their own internal. They're doing their own. We worked ourselves out of a job. They've done an amazing job. And this OmniBridge, when you see it, is run by a CEO who was an engineer at Intel, who cannot hear and cannot speak.
No way.
And he has created a venture to basically bring the deaf and hearing worlds together.
Wow.
And and when you were part of incubating, if you look at the incubation of that thing and you look how talented he is and what he is creating, and you look at it and you say, Intel is building this, good on
Mm.
Intel, right? And of course, there's
Right.
lots of strengths and capabilities that they bring to the table from computer vision and other things. But they just put this is public because it's on their LinkedIn, but I'll send you
Hmm.
the link. It's for OmniBridge. And, you know, there's there's not a dry eye when you hear this CEO's
Oh, that's
story.
cool. Yeah.
He would be an incredible, you want to talk about human potential? He is an
Yeah. I'd love
incredible
to interview
story.
him.
He
Wow.
is an incredible story, Adam. He's great.
Well, I tell you what, it's easy to be an optimist when you're involved in things, in projects like you're talking about, because I think that technology and a lot of it's hidden from view and it's certainly not being talked about in the chaotic and negative mainstream media. Right. But,
Totally.
you get a front seat seat to some of the most cool innovations going on, and I'm really optimistic about the future. And yes, we've got some choppy sea in front of us, but on the other side of that, I think it's going to be a really remarkable
Totally,
future.
totally. And when you see these people come together and they work together and they you know and they're just so engaged and so energetic, and just these giving people these opportunities is just the best thing ever, right? I mean, that's why these two
Right.
altruistic reasons have totally manifested themselves for me,
Hmm.
in terms of giving meaningful, purposeful work to people, helping drive growth, and really helping people do well by doing good, and have changed the world. Even if they don't, if the venture isn't changing the world, if the way they do business, how they hire
Right.
people, how they treat
Right.
people, how they go
Mhm.
about doing business with customers, even if that is the cumulative effect of all of us doing that, that's kind of like the house, right? The pebble in the
That's right.
pond.
Yep.
One act doesn't make a difference, but if we collectively can all do that act, then the ripple effect is
That's right.
massive. And I think we'll at some point reach the age of Aquarius as a result.
Yeah, I agree. It's really really cool to get a bird's eye view of these companies really caring and making a difference. Because again, that's not the narrative. And
No,
so, and the leverage really does exist in the big corporations. So, great work. Thank you so much for sharing the story with us today. And I'm looking forward to reading your book, The Unicorn Within. And we'll, anyone listening, please go check it out and reach out to Linda at
no, I
Linda
really
at
appreciate it.
Mach 49.
Yeah,
Yeah, who
Linda
knew?
at mach39.com.
All right.
All right, I'll send
Awesome.
you this
Thank you,
thing.
Linda.